Well, thank you guys. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm going to share my screen. And let me just do desktop there and hit share. And so I'm going to come over to here, and I just want to be sure that you guys knew about my blog in case you're interested in other things about things that you want to learn how to do. It's called picturestoryteller.com. And this is over 2,000 blog posts. And this all came out of me teaching out in Hawaii every year. I go and teach youth with a mission group, and I teach them lighting and business practices. And then a lot of them like to have things to like paper to read versus just in-person training. They want to have something they can hold and look through. So that's where that grew out of. But some of the stuff here, there's my uncle I was talking about earlier, who I learned photography from. You can read about him. And an example to the latest one is my mentor, Don Rutledge, who these are some of his pictures and talking about use of wide angle lenses and how he used not shallow depth of field, but a little bit more depth of field. But also Steven Spielberg also does that same technique. So the whole that's something there you can look for. It's called picturestoryteller.com. And then I have my own website as well, which is just my name, stanleyleary.com. And here you can see I have a range. I do a lot of video. I'm going to Tanzania next month to teach people how to do storytelling. I do humanitarian work, corporate, headshots, industrial work, architecture, design. I still do that. I do some real estate, drone work, product work. I've also do family portrait, seniors, editorial, panoramics, where 360-degree ones, education, science and technology, because I was at Georgia Tech, do a lot of sports. So you'll see stuff that's been published in Sports Illustrated, theater, and occasionally I'll do some weddings. So that gives you some of the different backgrounds. If you want a more extensive bio, I've written it here as well. So now to get to what I was going to share with you guys tonight is, and I'm just going to start this slideshow here. Okay. And everybody can see everything pretty good?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So there's many types of photography, as you guys all know. There's nature photographers, and you can divide that into wildlife and people who like flowers or landscapes. And then you've got product photography. The type of photography I deal with is not in fine arts, it's in communications. And that means it's very important that whoever sees my picture, that the message I want to communicate is delivered. This is not up for interpretation. Otherwise, companies would not hire me to help tell their stories because they don't want the audience to not know what we're trying to say. It needs to come across as a strong message. So I have a degree in social work, which helped me with understanding body language, which we're going to talk about tonight. And then I also have a degree from a seminary in communications and theology. And I get into armchair philosophy if you'd like to do that. But all this is helping me be a better photographer. Well, I'm going to start here with where you guys probably, most people start in photography. There are 3 stages. The first stage is a snapshot. I'm sitting on the plane, an elderly lady besides me wants to show pictures of her grandkid, and she pulls up the phone, and you're looking at a picture of grandkid, and you can barely see them because they're so far away, just like in this photo of my daughter. So you kind of put the person dead center, you take the picture, and these are memory joggers for most people. There's not much of a message here, but I see my daughter, and I'm just in love. I may even be crying and thinking everything else, but it brings back memories. But if you weren't there, it doesn't really do anything for the audience. So these are little snapshots taking photographs just to simply describe what you've seen. So this is where a lot of people start with their photography, and believe it or not, and you probably have noticed that in competitions, there are a lot of people who never move beyond this. Then the next stage, which I like to think of, is where you are using composition now. Okay, he's a little closer to camera. We can see we got some framing going on. They're artistic snapshots. But what does this say? Not much. There's a man. He's standing there. What's it about? We don't know the story. It's just a nice composition portrait of a person. But when we get into photos that start to communicate, the expressive images are images made for public rather than private meanings. In other words, they're not taken for me. And then, people go on trips all around the world. They'll come back with their whole team. A lot of places like churches, you see this, they'll do mission trips and they start putting up their pictures and put music underneath it. Well, the people who went on trips and the parents who sent them enjoy it okay, but there's very little communication that's happening. But in this case, there's a little bit more of a message. You get the idea that they're sharing a moment, and this is the president of Delta with a lady from Honduras. So the quick thing of the second stage that you guys go through a lot, which is rule of thirds, leading lines, S-curves, framing. And the rule of thirds, these are things that you guys are already familiar with. Framing, having things to look through, gives you that depth. Then the S curve, where you have things that kind of lead to make it a little bit more interesting. Leading lines kind of pull you into the subject. But expressive photography moves beyond that step. So how many of you are thinking beyond just composition and lighting? I mean, what are you trying to say with your photo is really what it comes down to. So I'll give you a hint to let you know if you have a clue as to what I'm talking about. Is the first thing you need to be able to ask yourself. And if you haven't asked this before you push the button, let me just tell you, you probably aren't delivering very well. And the question is, why am I taking this photograph? What is it that the audience, I want them to know about where I am and standing? In other words, just think of people who've never left their hometown and will never go to the coast and see the ocean. What is it that you want to capture to make them understand what that's like, and you want to take them there and transport them so that they feel like they've seen the ocean? So if you don't know why you're taking the photograph and you push the button and you don't know what you're trying to say or anything, no one else will know, because if you don't know, you're not helping us figure it out. So first thing you always need to ask yourself is, why am I taking this photograph? One of the things that would be very important for you to do is, there's three different things in expressive photography. There's the abstraction, which is kind of, if you want to think of it like that's more of the composition, but it's abstract and you can create tension and stuff with incongruity. There are human values that take into place. If I show, and we'll look at these and how this all works. So these are things that are dealing with emotions rather than just lighting or just composition and framing. So this is abstract because you don't know who the guy is who's holding the fire. It's just a sunset, and they become more of a symbolic person. But the thing with that is, it's a lot of people like these type of photos, but this is where people are more or less representative of something else, but it's not about that person. It's about the mood and everything else you're doing. So your colors here, you're putting silhouette and the sunset, it just creates a mood and emotional feeling for the moment. Now, the interesting thing here is incongruity. Is the guy is actually looking out of the frame, and he has less space to look out of than he does to our left and his right. If you look to the right, it would be more of a hope. But when he's looking out of the frame with very little there, it creates tension. So a lot of people often will think of you, if you're really into nature and you're really into beauty and postcard shots, you may not even be thinking about, how can I take pictures that communicate stress, the other side of emotions, the sadness. If I go to a funeral, I'm not supposed to take a beautiful picture of the casket and make everybody think, oh, that's a pretty postcard picture. I want you to feel the loss, most likely. So human values convey emotions, beliefs, traditions, and knowledge that we understand and share as humans. In other words, all of you understand the smiles. all of you probably had somebody play around with your bike when you're learning to ride a bicycle and grab the back of it and joke with you. So these are normal human values that cross over cultures. These guys don't even speak the same language. This is a guy down in Burkina Faso. We're very close to the Ivory Coast. This guy is speaking not even French. The guy on the bicycle, he speaks French, the guy on the right, as well as English. But by using some gestures and things within a few seconds, they're communicating through using what we would say is common human values of smiles, gestures, just how you react to someone. And if you pay attention, you can capture these things as a photographer and help people be pulled into situations and enjoy it. So first, you need to ask yourself what you want to express through your image. How do you feel about the subject? So if it's somebody who's very important in your life, a significant other, your spouse, um, or somebody, it could be your pet, it can be your grandchildren, your children, whoever that is, you need to kind of think, what is it that I like about them? What do they make me feel? Joy, happiness. Um, and some of the stuff you may be feeling really proud because they play sports. So you're going to wait and show them knocking the ball out of the park. Or you may want to show your grandchild who just loves to cheer on his teammates sitting on the bench. We had one of our children that just loved to do that. So the question you have to ask first is, what do you want to say with your photograph? That is true even in nature, in wildlife, or whatever. What are you trying to say? And if you don't know and what emotions and everything else, then you won't get very good photographs. So, for example, one of the best things you can know is if you want to express something about the majesty of the landscape, you probably aren't going to go during midday to show that. You're probably going to go at dusk or dawn to pick on the colors in the sky, and the landscape comes alive much more at different times of day. So it should your form should follow function versus function running primarily. You get a lot of people look at stuff and they're going, why didn't I win that contest? My picture's in focus. It uses a rule of thirds. It's well exposed, but it doesn't have expression. It doesn't have emotion. And those are things that are a little bit more subjective, but you have to kind of work with yourself to get to understand these. So the one place that is easiest to understand peak action is often in sports. But the part that's interesting is the peak action is not actually the peak action. When the guy actually slams the basketball through the hoop, that's too late. The best picture is just before it happens, just before the tackle, because the old Disney played off this in their movie with Go Ahead and Kiss the Girl. The whole movie is go ahead and kiss the girl, go ahead and kiss the girl. And then when they finally do, it's kind of anticlimactic. So it's the leading up, the emotion and understanding that. So this is a good example where somebody goes, I got a great slam picture. The guy slamming the basketball. Why didn't I win? Well, sometimes it's because there was nobody else around. There's no competition. It could have been a warm-up shot. And then there's all these elements. So the effort and expression in the face, you can see the football players going for it. Now, the other thing is gestures just in normal conversations. When somebody's speaking behind a podium and you're just waiting, and I have to cover these all the time in meetings, I need to get the moment where the person is really engaged. And that's usually when they gesture, when they make a little motion somewhere. So that's a lot more interesting than just a guy talking. So if you ever see a picture of people behind a podium and there's no gestures, either the speaker never gestured or the photographer is not very good because they just click the moment, oh, they're behind the podium. I got my shot and I'm done. No, you want to get the picture that engages and shows what the guy was talking about. He was really into it, what's going on. So touching moments here. So, for example, in the far left of the two little girls, anybody want to tell me who they are and what they're about? take a jab at what you think they are and who they are?
It's like mother-daughter.
A mother, daughter, anybody else?
Could be sisters too.
So nobody here was thinking they could be just friends because of the way they're doing. It seems more intimate, doesn't it, than just, it could be really close friends, but this is two sisters. So with the funeral there, what is this? Who are they in relationship to everybody there?
His
That'd be the
mo-
wife.
The wife, yeah.
Anything else?
I guess it could be the mother.
Yeah, that's the mother of the soldier who was killed in Iraq. And because he was Mexican and also, but not actually American, he wasn't a citizen, but you can serve as a, so they had two funerals. It took a while to get that to come back. So I wanted to show that you had the army here, and this was for a Catholic newspaper. And the family gave us permission to take pictures because it was very important for them to be able to celebrate their son, who's Mexican, who gave his life for America. So it gets into, it was a very interesting story, but I shot that for telling a story.
Another point of interest in that one is there was an Army guy and a Marine standing guard.
Yes. And that's because of anytime you have veterans, this part of the service, everything inside the church is a church service. And then the military part of the funeral service takes over once the body leaves the church, then the military takes over. Here, you can see how smiles make a difference too around the world, just the gestures. So my wife loves the picture of the little boy on the right, but and this is a coffee grower on the left. And one's in Burkina Faso, one's down by Chiapas, Mexico. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people want to think that every time they do pictures, we need you to smile. Please smile, please smile. They want everything to be a smiling picture. Well, that's not realistic. So what do you think these pictures, besides being contemplative, what do you think's going on here?
Exams.
Exams? But you can tell that they're really thinking. You can tell they're in deep thought. They don't look frustrated. They just look like they're really intense.
They're learning.
What's that?
They're learning.
Yeah. So would you do a learning shot where everybody's smiling? That's not always learning, but sometimes learning is something other than. So emotions are not one or two emotions. Too many people, when you take pictures of family, your whole thing is always just everybody look here and smile, look here and smile. And while that's okay to do for some pictures, that's not that you should never do it. But these are the moments when you're sitting at your birthday parties and you go to your family events. If you take your camera and you just watch, you can show your nieces and nephews and brothers, sisters, and friends and capture who they are, that they're really smart people or that they're contemplative. What are these type pictures here to you show? Who are the people in the photos to each other?
Looks like dad with the baby and the mom on the left one and the dad and child in the right one.
Yep, it's in both of those. And a lot of this is because of capturing the moment of the interaction and waiting for the right moment of the joy, but also the tenderness of how they hand it over. And I'm shooting that picture on the left with like a 10mm lens, and it's a round hut, and that's their house in Africa. Now, this is the part that a lot of people, I'd still do a lot of news at times. And when I'm doing this for a newspaper, everything here breaks the rule of thirds and normal composition, right? Where's the subject in relationship to the frame? Anybody want to guess?
Center.
And why is that not good? Typically, most of the time.
Static.
Well, the one way that you use when you focus and put something centered is it creates tension, because the other thing that we use to do the same thing with is actually a gun. So if you want to think of how you shoot a gun, you put it dead center and you take a shot, and you'll end up with something dead on your wall. Either way, it's very negative expressions. But if you're trying to show how horrible something is, this is done this way. People are doing sex trafficking and other things will break the rules and actually make everything go the opposite way to increase the negativity. So if I put him on the rule of thirds, it would be like trying to make this into a postcard moment. I don't want it to be a postcard.
Well, Stanley, in the one you just had, the
Yes,
question I have for you, is that a gunshot?
no, that's a
breaking the
car
windshield?
wreck.
Oh, car wreck, okay.
And I forgot what flew up on the front end of that, but I believe it was I forgot what hit the front of the windshield, but that was all shattered from the car accident.
Okay.
And this is where she's up against her car, is right behind her, and it's flipped. Her car door is there up in the air, and she's standing inside of her car, which is on its side. That you can't see, but the main thing here is car wrecks are not supposed to be pretty pictures. But the reason when I was doing this, and I was talking to a person when I was working out at gym today, she's paralyzed on one side because 30 years ago she was in a car wreck where the lights malfunctioned, and the other person wasn't necessarily at fault, but they both ran the light. Both of them were getting green lights. But without pictures like this, we would have never had traffic lights in our country. So these are ways you communicate to people where you want people to be upset in order to say, hey, we've had enough wrecks here. Let's put a traffic light up, or people, please slow down. Or like on tonight's news, road rage is a big problem in Atlanta right now. 20 people where guns have been pulled out, and 8 people have either been injured or killed in Georgia this year. So those are things where you want to show negative things. The other way of creating tension, what ways have I helped create tension here? What are some techniques that you can see that I'm doing?
You can't see what the subject's looking at.
So you want to know what they're looking at, yes?
Right.
Looks like they're in prison.
Yeah. There's screen doors looking inside of a clinic. So putting barriers between people instead of always trying to use those things to create a little tension, like there's something separating us between ourselves, and it physically is. But then this kind of works along with the story because of the unit I was in. I was trying to talk about tuberculosis unit that I was standing in. And then the little kid there, believe it or not, they're having malnutrition. Guess why they're having malnutrition in Ghana, where I was? What do you think the story would be? What am I trying to do? Get people to give more money to feed them, or what?
Well, I'm
So-
hoping you get more money to feed them.
Well, the problem
Why-
here, and this is the whole point of these, is the picture is supposed to make you wonder why they are like that. But the strange thing on this story is they are just having to teach the mothers how to prepare the food. The food is available. They just don't know how to do nutrition properly. So their kids are not getting the right food at the right time. They're feeding them the wrong things and not the good things. So it's always amazing when I do stories that some things, the stories go different than what you think they would. So which picture is better?
Right side.
The right side.
Why?
It's
The one he's
closer, there's
looking
no
to-
distraction.
For one thing, he's looking in the camera and has a smile.
Yep, you did exactly what a lot of people do. You see, the one on the right is if you want to talk about hope and good things about this kid. The one on the left is supposed to make you feel tension. So you jump to what you liked, not what the story is. So what is the actual story you want to tell? The one on the left, I want to tell about him being a very stressed area. And the one on the right, I maybe want you to connect to him and enjoying him as a person and telling his story a different way. But it depends on what you want. Do you want tension or warmth? It's not which one is better, it's which one tells the story. And both are good. It just depends on which story you want to tell. Does that make sense with everybody?
Yes.
It does.
So often when you guys pull pictures up in contest, a lot of people are going to drift to the postcard picture. But why is that the best one? That's only because everybody likes something warm and smiling. It depends on what's going on. Why not show some other things if it's negative? So what do you think's happening here?
Looks like hurry up and wait.
Yes.
It is. That's over 200 people to see that one doctor on the left. And they're all out there to the left. The left picture out that door is what that on the right is. And he's working with a nurse who's helping translate this lady there. And he has to go through 200 of these people in a day, just doing triage almost, and then figure out how to help them.
Wow.
Now, this is something that a lot of you guys probably could really benefit from, and it's basically one thing. How many of you bend your knees when you take pictures, and how many of you try to get up on a ladder or something taller to take pictures? Let me ask it another way.
A little bit both.
You should be spending more of your time bending your knees and getting up high, and your pictures will be always better because everybody sees the world at eye level, like where you stand. So, but there's other implications with that. When you're looking down like we're doing now on these children, what does that say about them? When you're standing up and children are below you.
Makes them smaller.
Okay, what else?
Like you're in charge?
Yes.
So who's in charge with this photo,
The guy with the book?
right? And who else?
Whoever they're looking at off to the left.
So remember, when you're taking the picture, this is not you looking at the picture only, but it's for the audience, is how I think. So I'm taking them for an audience, not for me, not for just whatever you want to interpret. Anytime you have the camera up high and looking down on somebody, the audience feels they're like children and they're responsible for them. When I get down low and look up at children, what does that do? How does the audience feel about them now?
Gives them more importance.
Yes, and it changes it. No longer am I the parent. I become more of like a child looking up at them, but they become more important, but it changes that dynamic. What if I'm at eye level? What does that do to the audience?
More
Makes you
involved.
More like-
involved.
Yes, more involved, yes.
Well, one of the things is at eye level with kids, the people seeing the pictures will think of themselves as kids when they were that age. Because probably the last time you were at that height level with kids is usually when you were a child. So it makes children, when you get down to that level, the audience starts to relating to them, like it brings out their child response to the people. When you look down on a person, you become the parent and they become the child, making you responsible, the audience. When I look up at somebody, I give them importance. So another thing I'm doing when I'm doing one-on-one learning, and I'm trying to encourage this and show that these colleges and private schools have a small teacher to student ratio. I want to get at eye level, and then I want to show the importance of people. When I'm showing relationships in schools, and I'm asked to photograph, it's like your camera club. If you guys are trying to promote everybody joining your camera club, you should be able to show people relating and laughing together, but with cameras in hands and learning from each other. And this is kind of what these schools do. This is Blessed Trinity, where I helped them with some of their recruiting stuff through the years. I did some of their first stuff and some others. But this is a show them walking down the hall, the students and the teachers more or less taking care of them. Now, when you put all these pictures together, what happens here? What do you see in this? Who are these people and what's going on?
A lot of teaching going on.
What kind of teaching and who's the teacher?
Like one-on-one teaching with the student being in the red, and the final picture shows success.
Okay, who's the teacher?
The white shirt.
Okay. Anything else?
Really hands-on.
Yeah, and the other thing here that you need to take away is when you combine photos together, you get more messaging going on. So if you used one of these photos, you'd only get part of it, but by including all three, it gives you a little bit more. By the teacher, I don't know if anybody's taking piano, the teacher takes your wrist and pulls it up like she's doing there. And then as she's showing her up here in the top right and then lower, this is one of the top concert pianists in Georgia, who's also teaching at Clayton State. So what kind of class is this, or what's going on here?
Looks like science, some sort.
Also looks like a vocal coach.
Uh-huh, that's true. The bottom one.
So which is it?
I say vocal.
So what's with the skeleton picture? What's going on there?
Breathing, how to breathe.
And it's also how to posture. He's trying to teach him posture, how to hold your head so that your body is your instrument. And he's trying to show him what happens. And sometimes these students have bad habits and he has to take the skeleton out and actually show them what they're doing wrong. So here he is talking to them and really trying to be expressive. And you tell he's a very animated teacher. He uses a lot of props to help visualize and teach something so you can see what's going on. And here he is working with him as he's practicing. So who are these people? How do they relate together?
Maybe an extended family.
Okay, what else?
Or many friends.
Anybody else?
A dad and his kids.
Anybody else?
Family pictures.
So if I took these pictures and you didn't have them together, would you be able to make that same kind of call?
No.
So when you put pictures together, once again, in combination, and this is why magazines or when you're displaying pictures, sometimes you may want to put, instead of just one picture at a time, you put pictures together, and this is called the X factor, where you start getting a little bit more communication happening. But this is a father in the top right, and his children here are all in those pictures. And that's just, it's a relationship that you point to things. This is another example of X factor. What's going on here and who's the guy? Who are these guys, in your opinion?
Two doctors and a patient, obviously.
Okay. Anything else?
Volunteers helping out.
Okay.
I think the first picture shows maybe some teaching going on.
Okay. What's the second one?
That looks like a surgical procedure, so he could be teaching the other person, but you can't see the other person.
Okay, the picture on the left is the same doctor as the picture on the right, but he's a surgeon and he's checking on surgery where he had skin grafts and he's checking on a patient, but the other one, he's actually doing surgery. Otherwise, he could be a general doctor walking around. I want to be able to show that he's a surgeon as well. the point behind all this is realize I'm not actually using words yet. You still need words to tell stories. You cannot do this without words. So these usually would need to be accompanied by somebody talking about who these people are. But what the important part here is to let you know how much you can actually convey, and everybody already know. And I didn't tell you who they were. You knew they were doctors somehow. You knew that that was a father son. It was not that strong of a leap, and you probably knew that within less than a 30th of a second. You probably knew all that from looking at the pictures. So is that helpful for you guys to see how the pictures can make a difference in how you communicate?
Yeah.
Very much so.
So before I go any further, I just want to see what kind of questions you have, because that may have stirred other questions and you're going, well, he's going, you didn't want to interrupt, but now you can interrupt and ask any kind of question.
Can't think of a question, but I've definitely have learned a lot from this.
Thank you.
I like the difference in the idea of being eye level, looking down, looking up. Gives very many different messages.
And how can you use that in your photography? What are some examples of using where you put the camera in versus the person's eyes? Looking up at their eyes and down. What are some other things you can do other than what I showed you?
One of the things I think about is like at a kid's birthday party,
Yes.
don't take a picture looking down onto the cake, but get down on the kid's eye level since it's his birthday. I think we tend to take pictures from up above because we're the adult.
And you don't always have to do children until you can get down low for anybody. So one of the things that I wanted to point out here was the importance of, let me just show this here, in headshots. It's that simple. It's like with women, this is stereotypical type thing, but we do it in our culture. You tend to slightly look down on women, and if you'll notice, all your front covers of Vogue or whatever, unless they're a runway kind of full length model, if it's headshots, you're looking slightly down at them, which pulls the eyes up and they look more like come hither kind of look, versus when you do men, you typically shoot slightly up to them, so you have a sense of authority. But if they're a leader, and let's say it's an executive woman, you may shoot more eye level to kind of keep that without making her too, you can sometimes overdo it one way or the other. So these are typical like headshots, just how what you're picking, where you pick the camera angle is based even in here. Can you see the difference of me looking down versus looking eye level in some of these?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and that's simple there. And then in humanitarian work, I do this as well, where we do the same kind of thing, where you're picking where your angles are, what you're doing. Children here just slightly down. And then when I want to get down low and and work with this lady and her carrying the kid, you can tell I'm looking at her eye level a little bit more. So I'm down on the ground. But here I'm looking slightly down, and this has two things I'm trying to do is show the chicken coop behind him. And if I came down around at normal eye level, the eggs block the chickens. And so sometimes you're picking things that way. But the other thing you need to be paying attention to in your photography is the edges. Like I'm intentionally being sure I have this person here and him over here and the tops of their heads. You need to look on the edges of your pictures, not just what's in center. So everything I'm doing, it's like I want to pick up just where I didn't want to cut off her. Whoops. And then I want to show her, want to show the environment. And it's very important that you kind of do these things that give context. So one of the things I did in my blog post here is my friend Don Rutledge did this very well, is a lot of people talk about bokeh in shooting wide open. Well, shooting wide open is basically very easy to do, and it doesn't take much composition skills because there's nothing to compose except for the person in it. Everything's out of focus. But the minute you start bringing that focus in, you're starting to bring in the background. Now you got to compose. The hardest lens to shoot with is a wide angle lens shot at a decent depth of field. Very hard to shoot because everything starts to become in focus, and now you got to really compose. So as you look here, this is about a man who's working real hard. He's real poor, and his wife's in the other room taking care of him. But at the same time, the lighting makes it look like he's almost laying on his deathbed because he's so worn out. Here, kids are working here, but the photographer's gone out of his way, Don here, to include just a slither of what's happening over here. It gives a little bit more interest. So it's not just, if you just did a picture of this, it's almost like bokeh, real shallow depth of field, but by including these other things, you give more information. Look at all the depth here, holding from edge, keeping their feet in, and then coming over to the bicycle and seeing the interest, and they're all looking towards them. And this, see how the eyes go this way? And then you have this little depth of the person going in the background. So it's not just a simple come over and get their picture there. It's everything in context of what it's like in Cairo. Here, the guy was showing communion in a church in Russia. Now, he could come in and cropped right here and had the communion, but he backed up just enough. And you notice how he's going as far as he can include this woman and this woman to give more context of what's behind them. And the same thing with Steven Spielberg. There's a whole video. You can go here and watch that, and it'll talk about how he used wide angle lenses and always used a greater depth of field than about any other filmmaker because he's trying to show context of what's happening around Indiana Jones, what's happening in each of the movies that he did. So the trick with most of the photography that you want to look at is pay attention to all the edges of your frame. The other thing is you need to, no matter what you're doing, you want to hook people with whatever you're going to start with a strong visual. So it may be this kind of a picture, a dramatic picture of lighting, a skyline shot, but whatever you're doing, if you're telling stories or you're trying to communicate with people, you need to hook them. So sometimes it's more important to do a quick hook than it is to kind of tell everything exact, because some of the pictures are a lot better that are not necessarily the best, you know, perfectly level, everything looks perfect. Sometimes you're trying to create those things that are that pull people in. It's like when the houses are destroyed here in Moore, Oklahoma. You got to remember that 5% of people, that's all they remember is information, but they really understand story, and that's within a hook. So hopefully I'm just going to I want you to come and look at different things on my website that can give you ideas of how to do better pictures, as simple as how many people use flash outside. Your flash outside makes a huge difference to your pictures. The reason is you get what do you call raccoon eyes with a lot of people with top lighting outside. And if you're trying to communicate emotions and everything else, you need to see their eyes. So a little pop-in flash makes a difference. Here I use flash around the room. They're coming in, and there's so much top lighting that I had to do that. Outdoors, you can't see the people. Then with a flash, on the beaches with a flash, you can see who they are. So the other thing that's important in showing emotion is I got to see the people's faces. So pull out your flashes more often, especially outside. But hopefully that gives you everything that I can think of right now. Any other questions? And I
Can you go back to that first PowerPoint you were doing?
the first PowerPoint. Let me find
Yes.
it. Yes, what about it?
Okay, go all the way up to one of the beginning pictures.
Which one?
Let me see. Go slow. It was two pictures, and there was a boy. Keep going. There. Nope. That it
What
was
one?
there. That one right there where your mark, where your red. Yeah, that one.
Miles?
What got me on this picture was the woman peeking over his shoulder on the left, And
Mhm.
then the fact that you cut the guy's head off on the right.
Yep. Do you need to not cut the person's head off?
I think not.
So, the thing here is I'm emphasizing him. He's over in the rule of thirds. The other person, if I crop him out, or if you had the moment to get it perfect, this is what happens when you do real photos. Now, if you stop and say, hold everybody, let me get my composition just right, you can make it better. But in
Right.
journalism, you're going for the moment, and sometimes you're not going to have everything as neatly and perfect as you'd like it to have it.
Right.
So
Is that,
you,
excuse me, that picture with a man's head cut off in a competition, the judge would deduct from because you
Lot.
cut his head off.
oh man, yeah,
But
that's
for just day-to-day photographs like this one is, I don't see any
That's
problems
not-
with it.
this is where you guys are coming from. This is the camera club, postcard
Mhm.
photography, and not looking at what wins competitions for things that communicate. There's a difference between communicating and have everything fit perfect rules. So basically, this would never win many awards for you guys at all because it's all negative.
Yep.
This would never
Right.
win in your competitions. So you have to understand camera clubs are basically based around, for 90% of everything you ever see in a competition is about a nice postcard shot that looks pleasing and everybody likes it and it's warm and tender and it may have some cool abstracts and stuff, but it's very rarely about negative tensions and it's not about slices of life as much as it's well thought out, well composed photos. So I have those, but that's not what works in storytelling always, because sometimes if I make it too clean, what it actually does is undermine the realness of it. And the more sometimes things are spur of the moment and not perfectly cleaned up, it creates an authenticity about the photo that's missing if it's all too clean. So you can spot a stock photo that's been set up versus one that was captured very quickly sometimes, especially AI when they have 6 fingers or 7 fingers in some of those.
Yeah,
But that is a good thing to spot out. But what you're asking is, it's again, this is what you have to look at is who's your audience and what are you doing? I'm trying to tell a story about coffee growers whose lives were changed because they form a cooperative and their lives got better. And that's this story here. And this one here is, this is totally different, but here it was just a moment between him and this guy. And so with the rest of the package, it works by itself. It may not work alone. Other questions?
My takeaway is you got to be asking yourself, what's the point of this picture?
agreed. Yeah, that was what Stanley said at the beginning was, why are you taking it? And you're saying now you need to know what's the point of it?
What am I trying to do with your picture? And if you're trying to win contest, I really don't care if I win a contest ever. I've won tons of them, but I'm more interested in my client is interested whether or not I got their story across. And that's a little bit different than most of you guys, but if you're taking pictures at your family events and other things, and you want to capture your friends and family and show their emotions and what they mean to you, you may be a little bit leaning more this direction. But if you're just taking pictures and want to do portraits and make everybody look, a different way, I've done that as well. So I have pictures like this kind of stuff with the, guy on the beach. There's a lot of stuff you can do that are a lot more pleasing kind of composing. And that's what I was saying within my portfolio of pictures. When you start getting into headshots have to look really nice and clean. You're not going to see much negative there at all. But when you get in editorial work, which is over here, this is all about news. It's more about a story being told, tensions in courtrooms. And this is a guy who shot up the Nichols, who shot up, and I was covering that for Associated Press. me doing stories at Dollywood's with the Ku Klux Klan, covering things like Gorbachev. And these are a little bit different. So the composition's different in what you're looking at. And the concept of cutting off people's heads, we do that all the time in editorial work. And even Pete Hurley does that even in his headshots. If you've seen his, he'll cut off heads too. So cutting off heads is not a rule that's wrong. I mean, it's not a hard, fast rule. But these are more your, I mean, you jump on the train and 2 seconds later, we're off the train. You better get the shot. They're walking down the street thing. I've got to get that. I'm just doing this as a coverage for news. And then you turn around and you got other things that you're just moving quickly from covering inside the funeral from this side to them praying here and to then when the military takes over, another funeral outside the church, capturing the firemen and who this is about, and then showing the respect. So there are a lot of things that you can kind of show working here with Governor Kemp or here with Andrew Young and then Carter, and then another funeral. I've done a lot of funerals.
Huh.
So, and this was all the different stages. So all these pictures ran, and that was Speaker Murphy when he died. So you can see that it just changes everything that you're doing and what you're doing. So, and this lady, same lady, but she's now with Jimmy Carter. And then you're covering news events with tornadoes through Tennessee. It's just, and you're trying to show devastation in different places. So news in composition and stuff, it's not the same as people aren't going to win Camera Club competitions with these kind of photos, but they do help people be informed in knowing what happened to people's homes. Other questions?
Well, Stanley, I think this has been great.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you. And that's all I have then.
Thanks, Stanley. I appreciated it as well. Hylos, can you give us a quick update? What's next on the agenda for you?
Yeah, let me see if I can find Stephanie Johnson. She's going to give us a talk on ICM, otherwise known as intentional camera movement. So that'll be an interesting project.
Sounds like a Rick Olson thing.
Yeah.
That's good. Stanley, thank you for showing how angles, emotion can change the nature of a photograph, and also your focus on telling a story. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for
I'm
having
gonna
me.
stop the recording.